Good afternoon. My name is Tina Cruz. I am a member of the Executive Council of the National Conference of Bar Presidents. I am also a past president of the State Bar of New Mexico. It's a privilege and an honor today to be able to introduce the next session that you all will be attending. The session is titled The Well-Being Playfield: Strategies, Tactics, and Predictions for Bar Leaders. Today, you will hear from leaders in the profession that are looking closely at all things related to wellness and well-being in the legal profession. We will start, of course, with Robin Wolpert, who is a leader in the National Conference of Bar Presidents. She will be leading today's discussion. You will also hear from Bree Buchanan, who will offer some insight regarding what state bars can do in order to launch active and dynamic programs related to well-being. You'll also hear from Chris Newbold, who will provide some perspective with regard to how it is that bar associations can ensure that you are bringing in the various strategic partnerships that are needed in order to thrive in the arena of well-being. For me to be able to introduce this session, it really is just such an honor. When I served at the State Bar of New Mexico as the president in 2020, we launched a well-being initiative through the Well-Being Committee, in no small part because of Bree Buchanan and Chris Newbold. In August of 2019, Bree attended our annual meeting and spoke to the 300 plus members of our bar association regarding the importance of well-being. That spurred an internal conversation with our bar association. Within a month, we were having our retreat, and Chris was our facilitator at the retreat. We came up with a 3-year strategic plan, and the first thing that was at the top of our list was launching our well-being committee. So the information that these two individuals have to share is not only topical, but it's something that you'll be able to integrate into the work that you do with your bar associations. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Robin. Thank you, Robin.
Tina, thank you so much. And thanks for sharing everything that you've been able to accomplish in New Mexico. I am privileged and thrilled to be with Bree Buchanan and Chris Newbold. And I just want to welcome you all to the well-being playing field. I know that all of you have actually been playing in this playing field for many years, since the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing issued its report and issued its call to action to create a profession where all of us, all legal professionals, not just lawyers, but everyone who's involved in supporting lawyers and making the legal practice work for clients, that call to action was just so important. Can we be a thriving profession? Can we flourish? Can we be happy across all dimensions of our lives? So what I want to do is share my screen, and hopefully this will all work smoothly. And what I want to do is begin by acknowledging all the work that everyone has been doing ever since we had that call to action from the National Task Force, and acknowledge all the just tremendous variety in important programming that's happening across the country. We are, of course, aiming for a cultural shift, and we're not there yet, right? And so what I want to begin with is talk a little bit about the state of the profession. And I keep hitting enter, and I can't get my PowerPoint to advance, so I apologize for that. Let me just try one more time. There we go. So these are the 6 dimensions across which we want to be flourishing in order to succeed as professionals. And all of us typically focus on the occupational element, the occupational dimension. But in fact, you need to be flourishing across all 6 dimensions of your life in order to really achieve the kind of success and performance that you're looking for in your own occupation. So let's look at the state of the legal profession right now. And what we've seen, and this is from the pre-pandemic research, we know a couple of things, and One is that attorneys have significantly higher rates of problematic drinking and mental health challenges than the general population. We are distinct in those challenges, and there's significant distinctions. We also know that newer lawyers are at most at risk, and we also know that lawyers don't seek help. They're nervous about seeking help for a couple reasons, mainly because they're worried that if other people find out, they will be discredited for seeking that help. And they're concerned about the impact on their license. And finally, we know that the problems in the profession begin in law school. In other words, we know that law students face similar challenges to lawyers, but there's something that happens within law school where by the time they get out, they are again at risk for some of these same trends. Now, let's just move to the International Bar Association study. This was a global study of lawyers whose final report came out at the end of last year. And none of these things I'm going to tell you are going to be a surprise. But what we know from that study, that global study, and it's not just in the US, that the most cited factors impacting lawyer well-being are stress, the absence of work-life balance, and high workloads, working culture and in the environment in which lawyers practice, and then physical and mental health issues. But the factors having the most negative impact when experienced are workplace harassment and bullying, unrealistic time pressures, demands to hit targets, and the inability to take breaks. So these all these factors are contributing to those trends that we're seeing in the data regarding the challenges to our profession that are distinct. In other words, our profession, the data shows, is the most unhealthy of all professions. And Bree, I'm going to turn it over to you for to continue this discussion.
On that note, as the unhealthiest of all professions,
Yeah.
thank you, Robin. And I am just delighted to be with such an esteemed audience. And, you know, all of you sitting in your rooms around the country and wherever you are have so much power and ability to really make a change for the lawyers in your profession. So I'll get straight down to business. So this other study, you know, the one that Robin first started talking about in 2016, the same person who did that, Patrick Krill, he came back and he really wanted to do another study to look at what are some of the risk factors. We know the prevalence of this, like how often it's happening. It's disproportionate to the general population in an extreme amount. So he did a study to look at some of the whys in this, and it just happened that when the data collection started, we were in the middle of a pandemic. And so we have some data also from the profession about this. Now, this was a large population out of the California and the DC bars of practicing lawyers. So advance, Robin, to the next slide, please. And so one of the things that they looked at and we were able to get a snapshot of is, well, with the onset of the pandemic, what has happened with our drinking? Now, we know lawyers prior to the pandemic across the board were experiencing what is basically high risk, hazardous drinking at the rate of 20%, 1 in 5, which was concerning. I will tell you, for lawyers in the first 10 years of their practice, that number was 1 out of 3. So again, you're going to hear us sort of weave in and out discussion of the generational differences and how they're experiencing this. Now, looking at applying the same test, we're looking at the respondents coming in at 30% are screening for high risk hazardous drinking. And maybe this is something that is short term that'll happen during the pandemic. But we know that when people start using drugs and alcohol in particular to cope with extreme stress and use it as their go-to coping mechanism, that really sets us up for future problems. And so we worry that we've got this lawyer population that's really poised sort of at a precipice here to develop problems with alcohol if they haven't already. We also saw from some of the data that only 2% of those 30% had ever received an alcohol use disorder diagnosis. So a lot of people out there who are drinking at a really risky rate. without a diagnosis to govern that, which is what you're going to need to be able to get into treatment and start doing something about it. So next slide, Robin. And we also were able to pull some data looking at the COVID effect on women, because when Patrick Krill did this, he broke it down, some of the data, looking at the responses and the difference between men and women. And we've already heard through the legal media that there really is a difference in how the weight of everything that we've been experiencing is falling more heavily on women's shoulders. This is in the legal profession, but it's in all professions across the board. But we see that women are experiencing meaningfully worse mental health conditions than men across the board. And I think something that we should be ringing alarm bells right now about this next piece, data point, which is the, maybe it's hyperbolic to say mass exodus from the profession, but way too many women are standing in the doorway thinking about leaving the legal profession, 25%. And they're thinking about this because of mental health, behavioral health concerns, burnout, stress, et cetera. Now, men are not too far behind at 17%, and something to think about as well. But when you consider all the work that we've been doing to try and bring some parity within the profession between the genders, as well as the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, we are looking at going backwards. Next slide, Robin. And so a final study I wanted to share with you. This was conducted by the American Bar Association as part of their Practice Forward initiative. This too is data that was happened to be collected during the pandemic. It is of a large population of ABA members across the country. And so if you just really kind of I'm leaning in to my computer monitor here because I know it's small, but there's some interesting information here. And so the blue bar is women and the green is the men. And you can just visually start to see the difference, how these are impacting them. The stress, the feeling of overwhelm, the inability to keep home and work separate. It's not falling equally on women and men's shoulders. And then the other here that the ABA found, these attrition intentions, where we have people these are ABA members, right? People who are saying that it would just be better to stop working altogether. And then the final piece of this is disengagement. And we know that disengagement is a hallmark indicator of burnout. And we are running, regardless of gender, at about 50% of our population. And there's just a whole legion of studies, et cetera, that talk about all that happens to our personal lives, our professional lives, our productivity, et cetera, when we start to become burned out and disengaged. Sorry to be a bearer of such bad news, Robin, but at that point, I think I'm turning it back over to you.
Oh, thank you, Bree. And so I think the data show the state of the profession, which is that we're facing huge challenges, and bar leaders, all of us in this program, are people who are poised to make a serious difference in people's lives. Like, we have the opportunity to be that person in the room as bar leaders when we're at board meetings. We have the opportunity when we're addressing statewide or countywide or wherever you are in your local district. We have the opportunity to be that face and that voice to make a difference in the lives of our lawyers, and also create a profession that is ready for that next generation of lawyers who are most at risk. So we have that chance. And as part of that, as a part of our job as a bar leader, is that we get to work with stakeholders throughout the profession, right? We get to create those ties and make those connections. They're going to help galvanize and help people work with bars, right? So we can't do it alone because it's too big, right? When you tackle something that really is big and makes a difference, you cannot just be by yourself or just be with your bar. So you need to partner with your stakeholders. And so one of the most important set of stakeholders, of course, are judges. And Chris, I'm going to turn over to you because you're ready to speak to this in a very powerful way for our members.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin, for the introduction. And again, let me greet all of my friends in the bar community. I wish we were there in Seattle. I wish we could be physically together, because I think so much of the great work that you all do as leaders of our profession is when we can be physically together, right? But unfortunately, we can't be. But it's awesome to see so many friends of mine out in the audience today. And then again, there's really important work to do. As Robin said, in many respects, you sit at the driving, you hold the driving, the wheel, the handle to the car, so to speak, in terms of being able to thrust this movement forward. We need you as bar leaders to lean in. And I know we talked a lot, Bree and Robin did, about just the notion of the numbers, and the numbers being rather dismal. I want to kind of frame it in a slightly different way before I talk about the stakeholders, which is, as you think about going home, talking to teenagers, talking to friends, talking to your kids, and if somebody said to you, should you go to law school? I think that's an interesting question. I've had a chance to work with a few small groups, focus groups, in terms of asking that question. And you'd be surprised that I think almost 50% of lawyers today would actually advise their son, their daughter, a close friend to not go to law school, right? And I think that that's a really revealing what's going on here. I'm a first generation lawyer. And as I think about that, I feel like there's some really interesting elements to where our profession's going. And if we don't exert ourselves as leaders today, I think that we're on a course, we're on a course, or we're at a crossroads, which I think could be really important as to where this ultimate movement goes. So let's just say this: we need you. Let me talk about some of the stakeholders that I think are critical in the well-being community. First, you, right? We already talked about that pretty extensively. Secondly, the folks who are at the wheel in terms of legal employers, right? I still think that one of the more significant ways to be able to engineer a culture shift is by having the right people in the right place from a partner perspective, and setting the tone for the law firms, the legal employers, the government agencies that ultimately can actually set the tone and the culture for the office that they work. This is going to happen one lawyer, one culture, one legal employer at a time. So legal employers, bar associations, there's the regulatory community, those who are looking to prevent disciplinary actions, right? And thinking about how can we be proactive in trying to get out in front of having to discipline our lawyers. They're thinking about well-being in a totally different way. There are the law schools, right? Where they are training the next generation of lawyers. We have to be working with them in tandem to be able to understand what their challenges are. How are they preparing the next generation of lawyers? How are they integrating who they're accepting and the diversity and the inclusion into those law school classes? And how are they supporting their students as they go through the process? Because at least if my experience was anything, part of the bad behavior started when I was in law school, right? And so there are opportunities for there. Two other communities before I talk about the judiciary. Our friends in the lawyer assistance programs. I mean, they are critical to what we do. I think of them as the ultimate safety net, because a lot of our lawyers, they reach that point in depth where they need immediate assistance. And we are so fortunate to make investments in that particular community to be able to support them. And then, again, professional liability carriers. I work as executive vice president of ALPS. We have a vested interest in seeing lawyers become better lawyers. And we can see it in the claims activity that when we don't address well-being, things spiral out of control, statute of limitations are missed, we don't practice as well as we could. And to be a good lawyer, one has to be a healthy lawyer. But I will say this, of the 7 communities that I think are particularly important from a stakeholder group perspective, there's one, the judiciary, that has, I think, really wholly kind of embraced this issue. Not in every jurisdiction, but we really feel like the catalyst that has propelled this movement forward has been, in many respects, our partnership with our judicial partners. And we reached out to a few of our friends in the judicial field who have been particularly important at catapulting the issue forward in their particular states. And I want to play a quick video for you about the why, right? Why is well-being so important? Why have state Supreme Courts and other federal courts and other jurisdictional and the judiciary in general kind of embrace this issue? So let me quick share my screen, and let's go to the why.
And this will be a test if you can identify your Chief Justice. Put it in the chat. Play a game.
Being a lawyer is a hard job.
Ah,
It can lead to stress and anxiety and long hours and sleep deprivation and just feeling burned out. And then all of that makes it harder to meet the challenges that we face as lawyers. And those feelings don't just stay at work, they can seep into the rest of your lives. And that's why I think that well-being is so crucial for the legal profession. If we as individual lawyers and as a legal community can figure out ways to better protect our well-being, it leads to better personal lives, happier, more relaxed, more enjoyable personal lives. And I think it also benefits us at work. It creates space for more engagement. And I think that when we're engaged, that's when we do our best work. The benefits of this for individuals, employers, clients, and the legal profession as a whole are immeasurable.
Why is wellness so important to the legal profession? There are two primary reasons. First, as the disciplinary system recognizes that a lack of well-being causes many ethical complaints, we can focus more on prevention at the front end, and we would have to focus less on severe sanctions at the back end. Thus, our profession and our clients benefit significantly. Yet this is not the most compelling reason. When we promote wellness, careers are redeemed and often lives are saved. Promoting wellness among our colleagues thus is a professional duty and also a moral imperative. In the words of theologian Thomas Merton, we need others and others need us. We are not all weak in the same spots, and so we supplement and complete one another, each one making up in himself for the lack in another. So no matter who we are, whether judges or lawyers or staff or law students, no matter how much success we have had, no matter how strong we believe we are, we all need to focus on wellness, and we will all benefit from doing so. Thank you very much.
Such an easy question. Here's my answer. Why? Better sleep. Better health. Better relationships. Better work. Better concentration. Better productivity. Better relaxation. Better time off. Simply put, life is better when we make a commitment to this concern. Thanks for asking.
All right, everyone, welcome back. So we have been talking about why is well-being such a critical issue. We've talked about importance of stakeholders, and Chris just showed us that tremendous video from various Supreme Court justices, state Supreme Court justices from across the country. But now the question you might have is, well, what can I do, right? I'm just one little bar leader, right? So what I want to do is start to share my screen again and talk about what you can do as bar leaders. And so the first question, and we're going to have some tips for you, and we're going to discuss them and one by one. The first one is build and nurture a community passionate about well-being. And this means, among other things, if you haven't created a well-being committee, this is something you could do. If you've already created one, and so many bars have, what can you do to support your well-being committee? So Chris, Bree, I mean, jump right in. These are bar leaders who want to know exactly what they can do and take home, you know, to their bars when they get back home. So tell them about this.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to know. I was worked at the great state of Texas bar for close to 10 years, and I was in the LAP department. I was at the end the director of the Lawyers Assistance Program, and so really embedded in a state bar association and thinking about the importance of these issues, not just for the lawyers that rang our phone, but for the entire profession and the bar. And here's what I really kind of came to believe passionately is that it is such a win-win for bar associations because we have all, and I still think of being a member of the bar, I still say we have really been under attack in many ways. And this, when you show that you really care about the well-being of your members, the lawyers in your state, it really speaks to the relevance of ongoing relevance and importance and vital position that a bar association can play in the everyday life of a practitioner. And I think anytime that's been an important thing, but now even more so to demonstrate just the vital relevance that your bar association can have for your members.
Yeah,
And you know, everyone wants to know, Bree, that they matter. I mean, that's really, I mean, whenever you interact with anyone, just as a human being, just acknowledging that people matter in how you talk with them, how you create possibilities for them. And that's what Bree's talking about, is that when you treat your members like they matter, they get it at a visceral level, and you see it when they interact with you in meetings and in other activities. So show people that they matter. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to say I do a lot of strategic planning facilitation, and you know, the word of the last 5 years has been relevance, right? And I think that there are interesting opportunities for engagement of your bar on this particular issue. I think it has the opportunity to attract folks who are outside of the normal, what I'd call kind of bar junkie community, right? Because I think that there are people who are really passionate about having discovered something that is broke in our system and want to lean in and be part of the solution, right? And so you all are at the kind of I call it the laboratories of action. And the more that you welcome people into this space, give them the opportunity and nurture them for a big state bar. And there's a lot of big state bars that are doing a lot of great work, but you know, that could be 50 people and 6 subcommittees. For a local bar, that could be 5 people who get together and put together content and build awareness, right? You don't have, it doesn't, what I'm talking about is give them an on-ramp to come in, serve the bar, serve the profession, serve your respective bar association.
All right, let's move on to tip number 2. Integrate and embed well-being into everything you do. So all of you bar leaders out there who have been working on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues for a long time, you know that this is a formula for success, right? You embed things and you measure outcomes. So this is the same recommendation we're making with respect to well-being. Chris, you're up on this. You want to talk more about this?
Yeah, again, I just think that this is a really important one. And again, I want to highlight that I watch and monitor a lot of things that go on in the bar community. And you're already, I think, doing this particularly well. So keep on it, right? There's a reason that this issue has stayed on the front burner and hasn't went onto the back burner, because there's still a lot of work to do. Just when we're getting sick of talking about it, or you're getting sick to talking about it, a lot of your bar is hearing it for the first time. Right. And I hate to say that, but that's, you know, going back to political campaigns, that's rule number 1, right? We have to continue to think about how do we build well-being content into our annual meetings, building well-being content into our CLE platforms in terms of what we're offering as content to our bar members. Just be thinking and be conscientious about this particular issue and the integration that you have at your disposal.
Bree?
I think that it is vital that also that the state bars lead and set an example, because in this in particular, because the state bars lead what the local and regional bars do. And just be really thinking about how to make this happen. And I encourage you to consider, strongly encourage you to consider involving your lawyer's assistance program and helping to brainstorm and design what are the different programs and things that you could be doing for your members. And also know that if you, one event that's coming up that could be really helpful for you in this is that the Institute for Wellbeing in Law is hosting our 3rd annual Wellbeing Week in Law, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May, and it's the first week. So go to lawyerwellbeing.net and you can find out more about it. But we put together just ready, like in a box, everything you need. So the smallest bar could take advantage of this for their members. And every day of that week, we celebrate a different dimension of well-being. So that's one real concrete idea that's coming up that you could utilize.
Robin, one more quick point. One of the tools that you have available to you is the fact that you have direct communications with the lawyers in your respective jurisdiction. Utilize your communication platforms effectively to promote this particular issue. Talk about well-being in your president's report. Create a well-being corner for your bar journal. Think about a well-being section of your e-blast, right? You are very intentional about the information. And I would say during the pandemic that your members have come to rely on you more for content, not less, as they've been looking for information coming out of the courts, which means that your communication platforms, your social media channels have become more relevant. Please do your part in terms of embedding well-being into those particular channels.
Yep, and Chris, you anticipated the next tip for our bar leaders, which is tone at the top. And so it's not just limited to what Chris was just talking about in terms of communications. Like, we want you to use your communications to message this out. And as Chris was saying, because of the pandemic, when other ways of getting information are so scarce, like we're not bumping into each other anymore in the courthouses, we're not bumping into each other at bar meetings, right? So how do people find out? They go to formal bar events or meetings, maybe by Zoom. And so this is a way to embed it, as Chris was talking about. But the other thing about tone at the top is that you as a leader have to model well-being. And I'm not saying that you have to hit it out of the park in terms of getting the appropriate sleep and doing all the things that you know are going to promote your health. But you need to show people that face that you're modeling it and you're being it. In other words, your commitment is all over who you are. So when people see you, they say, that's a person who embodies well-being. They care about their team. They care about the well-being of members of their board, of their executive director, of the staff. And then the other thing about modeling it and tone at the top is that when you do that, it pushes out throughout the whole organization. So you start talking about it and it's pushed out so that the organization really reflects the leadership at the top, right? Bree, did you want to say anything else about this?
That was perfect, you guys. I just say ditto. So
okay. So let's talk about new lawyers. And the reason that this is up here is twofold. We know from the data that they're most at risk, all right, of any population. You've got to take care of your newer lawyers, and they really count on you because they don't have the power to look out for themselves. They need powerful people who are in leadership positions to keep them in mind. The other thing is that they're the future of the bar, right? If you're going to build the next generation bar, you got to bring in your new lawyers. Chris?
Well, the other thing I would say on this point is, let's be realistic. They are coming into the profession with a very different set of expectations than previous generations, right? And so that's going to really bring some interesting discussions in terms of cultural tensions in firms based upon, not everybody is interested in the big salary, right? If it comes at the expense of kind of no life no life outside of work. And so, again, I think that we have to help foster discussions and nurture discussions around what are we doing for this particular community? I'll talk a little bit more in the prediction section about some of the thoughts, but just appreciate that there are generational issues at play, and your ability to connect this issue well-being with your young lawyer divisions and your baby lawyers, so to speak, I think is going to be critically important as we continue to build. And again, societal movements oftentimes begin with younger generations, and I think that's going to be the case here as well.
Yeah. Just skipping ahead on predictions, I think that there will be a change in regards to how well-being is dealt with in the legal profession, because if nothing else, the change of the generations, because we know from the Gen Zs and the millennials that this is well-being, work-life balance is their top priority. There was a Thomson Reuters poll 2019, they're looking at the new associates, and the number one thing that they were concerned about was work-life balance. It wasn't the salary. So we're really seeing a shift. We also know that this cohort of young people are experiencing worse mental health than anybody in the past, and they're much more willing to talk about it and ask for what they need. So the drumbeat around this is just going to get louder and louder as time goes by. In response to a question in the chat also, I think utilization of these ideas and projects is always key. And so in responding to your particular question, if you're looking at trying to get younger lawyers to utilize, I would bring in your young lawyers to develop the programming. When you do that, it's amazing the level of creativity that you'll see from them, and ask them to drive your programming and things that are just new and exciting.
Another thing is that new lawyers will often have like maybe a benefit of membership in a state or local bar. Often bars will give them a discount or let them join for free. But then if you want to avoid that drop off after the free time period ends, engage them. And one way is just what Bree said, which is give them the power to design this. And then you as leaders, provide the political power to back up what they recommend. It's just a real great way of not only building a next generation bar, but actually implementing the things that we really all need to do to create that cultural shift in the profession. And the next generation sees that. All right, number 5 tip for our bars is to engage your members through well-being surveys. Bree?
Right. And so one of the things that we want to know is that I think I hear from bar associations, state bars across the country, they want a snapshot of what's going on in their state and with their lawyers. And so I feel like one mechanism for doing that is to look at your annual member surveys and consider building in a section, not just a question or two, but a real meaningful section to assess how people are doing. And I can tell you, through the Institute, that we're all a part of, are working on developing sample surveys that state bars can use. But I think that is a wonderful starting place to get that snapshot, and then you can engage them, put together out ideas, and then survey them again and start seeing what works and what doesn't. Chris.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think surveys can be, sometimes they're underappreciated as an engagement tool, right? So first of all, we're a data evidence-based profession, right? So the ability, I think one of the reasons why this issue took off is we actually had to provide the data that gave us the platform to be able to go and advocate for some of the things that obviously we've been seeing. So there's a great opportunity here for you to go out to your members, ask their opinions, right? And you're going to get data back, but what you're going to do in the interim is you're going to educate them through the survey questions that you're actually asking them. You're going to allow them to reflect on where they at. Are they finding professional success? What are the drivers that are actually affecting them either up or down, right? And that's good baseline data for you to then know 3 years from now, let's do it again, right? And set that. So I just can't say enough about the survey side. And Bree's right. The Institute for Wellbeing in Law, we've seen enough of these surveys now where this is going to be fairly easy for you to take it, pick it up, implement it with respect to your survey architecture. We've seen them in West Virginia. We've seen them in Utah. There's just a number of different states that have already done this. And so if you're looking for an engagement mechanism with your members in which everyone's going to give an honest assessment and their opinion, this is a great tool.
All right, let's go to tip number 6. Unfortunately, my screen is not working again. So let me just see if I can bring it up one more time, okay?
Bree, do you want to take it? Number 6 is
It's not working. I'm sorry.
just take it.
That's okay. It's aim big and look for systemic change. And so what we mean by that, I mean, it's great here at the outset, sort of putting your toe in the well-being water here to do programming and fun runs and meditation and yoga at the beginning of your annual meeting, et cetera. But we know that signals to people that you care about this, but that's not going to move the dial and change the profession. And what we really need is systemic change within the profession. So one of the things that you can start doing and thinking about is through your well-being committee or creating a lawyer profession well-being in the law work group or task force, is to start looking at what are the policies, practices, procedures, and rules in your state that are causing problems. So an example of one of the character and fitness questions, which are in many states have been very broad, and we know from surveys have a chilling effect on getting law students to ask for help. They will not go and ask for help, even when everything is falling apart, because they're terrified they're going to have to report something to the bar examiners. So many states are just wholesale removing those questions. We're also looking at changing some of the disciplinary rules or clarifying, for example, that well-being is a piece of our duty of competence. And we already have Virginia, who Justice Mims led that effort in Virginia, Massachusetts, several other states. New York is looking at it. So there's a lot of things that can be done. So I'll kick it over to Chris to keep expanding on this.
Yeah, the last one I would say is, again, systemic changes, I think, really kind of set the tone. And another area is, in many states around the country, your ability to become accredited for CLE credit when we're talking about ways in which you can be more productive for your clients are not accredited, right? And we think that there is real opportunity there to rethink what's our mission with respect to continuing legal education, and should we be thinking about accrediting well-being content and efforts that ultimately make lawyers better practitioners? And in the end, isn't that what it's all about?
All right, let's move to the next slide, please. And we're going to go to tip number 7, which is take care of yourself. So as bar leaders, and we were talking about this earlier, how as a leader and tone at the top, you have to live it. You have to live well-being, and it has to be part of everything you do in your communications, that you care about your team, that if your team is going to win, they have to be well. And it's your job as a leader to look out for that success. But you got to take care of yourself too, right? So Chris, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right? This is the proverbial, put your own oxygen mask on before helping others, right? you got to take care of yourself. Your ability to effectively lead is premised on you taking care of yourself first. When you do that, higher productivity, higher ability to lead others, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right, and let's go to the next slide. And our last tip, and you're going to hear much more about this toward the end of the program, but leverage I Will. So Bree, tell us, what is I Will? Because maybe some of the people in our audience haven't heard of us.
Sure. So I Will stands for the Institute for Wellbeing in Law. I put our website in the chat, so lawyerwellbeing.net, if you'd like to check us out. And in short, what this is the group of lawyers who came together in 2016 and created the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing report, which was published in 2017, endorsed by the Conference of Chief Justices endorsed by the ABA in the mid-year meeting in 2018, and has really been the product that has kicked off what has become a global well-being movement. So those of us who were involved in that saw there was no limit to what the appetite for this and what we were doing. And so we created a nonprofit 14 months ago. And I'll tell you more about that in just a minute, how it can help you.
And I'm happy to report that all three of us play a role in I Will. And of course, Bree is our president. And you probably got the sense of her area of expertise. Chris is invaluable, and that's who we are. I'm proud to be a treasurer as well. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, we're going to talk about predictions and the crystal ball. All right, so we are all three of us are involved in creating this cultural shift in the legal profession. And so we're seeing much movement, just things are happening globally. So I've asked Bree and I've asked Chris, look into the crystal ball and tell us what the state of the profession is going to be in 10 years. What are you seeing that bar leaders will have accomplished, that stakeholders will have accomplished in 10 years, and whether we will even recognize the profession, that we are all part of. So Chris, I'm going to point it to you first. I'm going to put you on the hot spot on your predictions.
I'm going to go a little bit. I think Bree's going to come at it a little bit from the micro level of actually looking at the profession. I'm going to come at it from the macro level. We know that in general, corporate America has already embraced this concept of well-being, right? There are, most major corporations have now totally, they understand that well-being is critical to the productivity, the engagement, the retention, and the attraction of employees, right? And so that has already filtered into what I'd call big law, right? Lots of folks who are actively engaged in the Institute for Wellbeing and Law are big law. Some of them actually even hiring folks who are working on this full time. My prediction is the blind spot of this of this movement at this point in time is a community that you are very intentional in serving, and that is our small firms and solo practitioners, right? 70% of private practitioners are generally in firms of less than 5. And those are oftentimes the hardest groups to find, to build community around, particularly our solos, right? I mean, when you go to work and there's nobody else around and you're in a bad spot, that's a really tough position to be. So I guess I'm going to make the plea to you that I think that the success of this movement ultimately will become our ability to effectively address that particular community. And I think organized bars are essential, as are, I work for a malpractice carrier that focuses on solo and small firms, right? So let's work in tandem on that particular issue. Two other things that I would say on predictions. One is we can look at society right now and you can see a rise in our discussion about mental health. We are human beings before we are lawyers. I think I saw that in the chat. That is critical to, I think, how we need to think about this particular issue when we look at some of the things that are happening in the sports world, right? Simone Biles, a gymnast who said, you know what, I'm not in a place where I can go and perform at that level right now. Very interesting debate that came out of that. Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, right? Their society is talking about these issues, and I think in a very healthy, positive way. We know that our profession has not exactly been at the forefront of change and accepting and evolving, right? I think that society is going to help us get there faster rather than later. The other, I think, driver of what I think will catapult this issue and accelerate it, this issue is going to pick up more quickly than less quickly, is what we talked about previously, which is the generational elements of this. The best talent right now coming out of law schools are thinking about who they're going to deliver that talent to in very different ways. And so that is, I think, going to accelerate some of the discussions that are happening within firms about what we need to do to be addressing wellness issues. Because again, there's just very different expectations today than there used to be. I think that's a positive thing. It may disrupt the business model. I think it won't disrupt the business model. It will evolve the business model. And again, the longer that you can retain excellent talent, and I think an investment in wellness will allow for retention, which will allow for longer tenures at firms, which will allow for better client relations. So I think you wrap all those up, and there's some really positive things. I think we have tailwind behind us, and I think that that's exciting.
Yeah.
Bree?
Sure. And I think sort of drawing on, Chris mentioned the big law. And one of the things that we're starting to see is that, the vault rankings for major lawyers, the AmLaw 100, AmLaw 200, they've added a wellness ranking. And I think that a prediction is that we're going to increasingly see much more vigorous competition for those spots and who gets the highest ranking, because having that sort of emblem to be able to say you're number 1, 2, or 3 in caring about your employees, your lawyers, is really going to help with the recruitment and retention crisis that the profession is facing and probably will face for some time. So fighting for those rankings. And just a couple other things that are measurable outcomes. I think that we're going to see at the 10-year mark from the publishing of that seminal task force report, so that's in 2027, that we'll see all of the states have a well-being task force commission or committee of some sort. It's definitely a trend. We have 31 states right now. And so many of the states, in conjunction, either at the behest of their Supreme Court or their state bar, or a combination of the two, are moving in that direction. And I just really think in very near future, we'll see 100% of states who have removed those unnecessarily intrusive character and fitness questions that are causing so much trouble. That's very much a hot trend right now. So.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bree. All right. Next, we'll move to the next slide. And what I want to do now is have you get to know Bree Buchanan a little bit more, because she is president of the Institute for Wellbeing in Law. Chris and I are also part of this organization. And we remember how we told you, tips for bar leaders. The one that we didn't really talk about so much was leverage I will. So we are there for you. And Bree is going to walk you through some of the things that we can do for you to help you. So Bree, take it away.
Absolutely. And I know I'm watching the time, so we're going to go through these pretty quickly, but next slide, please. So like I said, we've been working together since 2016, but we really created this think tank around well-being in the profession. And here is our mission. And we really are looking at a holistic approach to promoting well-being. Those of us who came together out of such deep concern really started with our concern around the lawyers who are suffering with the impairments, the people that are going to the LAP programs. But we also knew that there were so many other members of the profession who simply weren't thriving. We weren't living up to our capacity and the expectations that we had for ourselves, much less for each other. And so we created this, and we really are looking at being not so much. We will never do direct service. We're never going to supplant the LAP programs. We are not so much about direct programming of teaching individual people how to take care of themselves. We're about systemic change. And so policy advocacy, research, scholarship, technical assistance for states who are working on these issues, that is really our goal. Next slide, please. So just a little timeline here of what has simply happened in a very short period of time. We have, I will just say, been incredibly successful in what we've undertaken to do in such a short period of time, which speaks so highly to the fact that this is a really powerful idea at the right time. Everything that we have picked up and tried to do has just exploded with popularity, to sometimes to twice as much, 4 times as much beyond any expectation that we could have. For example, the conference that we just had less than a month ago, our first annual virtual conference, we had 600 people there. We had almost tripled the number of sponsorships. And sure, I can be bragging a little bit, but really what I want to tell you is that is indicative of what a powerful idea this is within the profession across the board. So next slide, please. So I think that we've already sort of covered some of this stuff, but we're not trying to be a membership association or a direct service provider, but are really about a think tank looking at systemic change. We are really committed to incorporating the concerns around diversity, equity, and inclusion in every single thing that we do. And so we have a vice president of DEI. We have a very robust DEI committee that's involved in every other committee activity. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to let you know about what a high priority that is. Next slide. Here that is, and this is our DEI policy. It was the very first thing that our board voted upon when we got together in January a year ago, and making sure that all of those considerations are woven through all of the work that we do. Next slide, please. And so you can get a sense of the type of work that we're doing. We have a high-level advisory board that we've convened, but we also, a lot of our work, most of our work will be done through our committee. So we're all, other than an association management company, we're all volunteers at this time. We have a volunteer board steer. We're getting ready to hire our first executive director, and then we'll start hiring staff. But all of these committees are populated with volunteers. And currently we have, I think the number is close to 120 volunteers who are serving on these various committees. And so, for example, the Policy and Advocacy Committee, just to talk about that one, is overseeing the technical support of all of our state task forces that we're helping to foster and grow. Next slide. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just it's a little bit outdated, but I can just gives you an idea of the saturation across the country of these are the states where there is, if it's yellow, it's a state bar alone, standalone committee. And California should be added to this, should be in yellow, I can see. And then the other greens are where actually you have the Supreme Court and or the state bar have come together to establish a high-level task force that is focused on developing systemic change for the profession within their state. And so what this really came out of that National Task Force report, which was a charge to the Chief Justice of each state to convene a multi-stakeholder task force or group and getting everybody with the authority to make changes to sit together at a table and tackle this pervasive problem. Next slide, please. And so here is the cherry on top. Here's the dessert for the presentation. And we just want you all to know that we are here for you. And so we are available. And when I say we, that includes the 3 people that you see on your screen, along with some of the other board members, to help establish this state task force or committee. We can provide free consultation to develop these task forces, to help you identify who needs to be at the table, help you strategize around how to get them at the table. What is the final product that you want to have, and help you develop that, figure out how to market and implement it, etc. So that is something that we're committed to doing. It's a big piece of our time, but we really believe that the key to creating long-term substantial systemic change is moving state by state to look at these policies, practices, procedures, and rules that need to be modified. That's what I got, Robin.
Well, that was just a tremendous way to end, and we can, stop the share screen. And what I want to do is see if anyone has any last minute questions. I know we've been focusing on those questions in the chat as we've been going, but what I want to emphasize as you walk out of this plenary session is what Bree talked about at the very end, which is IWIL is a partner for you. And if you reach out, we will be your partner to help your bar develop something that's appropriate for your bar. And you heard Tina Cruz when she introduced us all, right? And she talked about what she did at the New Mexico bar. And so as we end, what I want to do is turn things back to Tina. And Tina, tell us, how did we do? When you reached out to Iowa, when you reached out to Chris and Bree, how do we do? And just share with other bar leaders your experience.
Thank you, Robin. This really was a fantastic presentation. As I noted earlier, in a lot of ways in New Mexico, we were inspired when Bree presented at our annual meeting in 2019. And a couple of months later, we had Chris help facilitate conversation regarding our well-being committee. He was able to help us not just look at what these initiatives could ostensibly look like in the future. He was able to help us put a plan in action. So once the seed was planted by Bree, we very quickly undertook an effort to cultivate that seed by taking the first steps, by reaching out to the key stakeholders, and by ensuring that they were all invited to the table and engaged. And all of this would not have happened, of course, without the support of our state bar staff and our governing body. So of course, this is a collective effort and one that you need to undertake in a robust and dynamic way. So for those of you that are new to this arena, I would encourage you to reach out to to Bree and Chris. They're fantastic resources. And above all, be sure to include all of the stakeholders. In New Mexico, we reached out to Senior Justice Barbara Vigil at the Supreme Court. And much to my surprise, she immediately wanted to get engaged, and we were able to create a judicial well-being subcommittee. So the interest is there. You're going to have individuals who are passionate about the topic and who are going to want to be engaged. You just need to reach out to them and invite them to the table. With that said, we are out of time on this presentation. Bree and Chris, thank you for a terrific presentation. Robin, thank you for facilitating the conversation.